We're going to say that. State rep. He's a former paramedic. He serves on the State and Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs Committee in the House at this point. He formerly served on the Education Committee, and he did very important work there. He has sponsored legislation to abolish DEI, to hold judges accountable. He's done a lot of good work for our state, and he is not afraid to speak the truth or stand out when he has to do what's right, even if he's doing it alone. So I would like you all to give a round of applause for Representative.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you for Young Americans for Liberty for having me out here. The usual disclaimer, however, will apply. What you will see and what I will speak about is not necessarily reflective of their opinions. It is my opinion and beliefs that we're going to be discussing here. First of all, thank you for everybody coming out tonight. I know parking's probably been interesting. Okay. So we're going to talk about something a little bit different tonight. We're going to look at things from a different angle than you might be used to looking at them from. I spent a very long time trying to understand how we got to where we're at, what happened, and when I finally figured it out by applying what's called a political warfare lens to all the circumstances we're in, I realized something very important. The thing that I realized is you literally can't win with the frame of reference that we're ingrained with and we typically use to see how politics works. You can't win. The system is rigged against you from the beginning unless you start looking at things in the correct way. And I say political warfare, and that's the reason that I founded what I call Counterspell Group. We organized in the state of New Hampshire. And the reason it's called Counterspell Group is because political warfare is a newer term. It's a term that came about around the time of the founding of the Soviet Union, so early 1900s. But political warfare is not new. Political warfare has been something that's been ongoing for literally thousands of years. And one of the names that it's gone by throughout history was spellcrafting. Spellcrafting. So we're going to work through this. Forgive us, we don't have audio. Some of the slides may have audio. If you can't hear my computer, that's all right. We'll work through it. We'll figure this out. You're also the first group to get to see this particular briefing I've put together. So hopefully you'll enjoy it and you'll learn something. Now, we don't have time to take a big bite out of political warfare. It's too big. The whole subject matter is too big. We will have time to drill down really hard on one issue that's going to make the entire thing pop so you understand what we're talking about. Political warfare is fought at the level of language and definitions, all right? So we apply, in order to understand what's real, a three-part test to truing language. First, we identify the historic or the ancient definition of the language. Then we take a look at the modern, popular definition of the language, and then we align both of those to the observable reality and see what better fits. Thesis for tonight. I'm going to go on to prove to you that the historic, ancient definitions of language are often far more accurate and actionable than the modern definitions that we've been taught that you might find in dictionaries that are designed on purpose to make you ineffective at fighting back. The importance of definitions. Jordan Peterson says there is literally no difference between speech and thought. Okay? Control over language means control over thought. Our laws are made entirely of language. That's what they are. Guess what happens when you control the way people define language? You control the way they apply law. Warfare at the level of language has been the foremost weapon of control for thousands of years, and we're going to prove that too. Historical proofs. Michel Foucault, who knows who Michel Foucault is? The father of postmodernism, the French philosopher of modern times. Discourse is not simply that which translates struggles. Discourse is the power which is to be seized. By the way, he was also a postmodern Marxist. George Orwell, a socialist critiquing authoritarianism. If thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. Georgy Arbatov, you probably don't know him. Top Soviet strategist on how the Soviets will conquer America. We will remove the image of the enemy from their minds. In other words, he's going to control language to make Americans view the Soviet Union in more neutral terms. Plato from Republic on the need to control citizens' ideas. Then the first thing will be to establish a censorship of the writers. We will desire mothers and nurses to tell their children only the authorized stories.
Subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
All right. Learning. So let's learn about just a simple modern application so you understand how this works in practice. All right. Let's talk about the transition from the original legal language that you will find in U.S. statute, illegal alien. And let's talk about the change to the current popular term, undocumented migrant. So this actually happened culturally in several stages over several decades. So the first change that happened was the alteration to the legally defined illegal alien to illegal immigrant. All right, so it's a soft change. It's not a big change, but what it does is it softens the image a little bit. It humanizes the illegal alien, makes them more sympathetic. The next change was to undocumented migrant. This is a change that became popular under the Carter administration. Undocumented is not so soft a change. Going from illegal to undocumented removes the element of the crime that is in U.S. statute. And what happened when that language was changed? Mass amnesty happened. So it wasn't just a nothing burger. They changed the terminology, and they followed the change of terminology with a change in policy and legal application. The next one, this is really getting really weird. The next one changes the word immigrant to migrant. Why migrant? Well, this one's interesting. Immigrant is something people have done forever. You might move to a different country for one reason or another. Maybe you're persecuted in your home country. Migrants never settle. Migrants are back and forth all over the place. It changes the very understanding of human nature away from a settled people to a people that are nomadic and can be controlled. Hold on, my mouse is giving out on me. What's going on? All right. All right. This was done according to a plan. This was done to America on purpose. All right. Aristotle documented immigration being used as a weapon by tyrants against native populations 2,300 years ago in his book Politics. The Soviets strategized using America as a weapon against, or using immigration as a weapon against America, and advanced that policy in America via united front groups all across the USA. The Democrats adopted what's called the Cloward-Piven strategy that came out during roughly the 1960s. And what the Cloward-Piven strategy was it said, actually, the proletariat, the revolutionary force, has been sapped out of the middle class because their lives have been too good. The programs we instituted, the crackdown on the monopolies, it resulted in a better quality of life for the average American citizen. Well, they couldn't have that because that saps their revolutionary zeal. So they want to flood all of the systems of the United States of America, from immigration to welfare, to break all the systems, to make people mad because mad people are revolutionary. So the effect of importing deeply different populations from around the world is to promote conflict between those groups so people can't organize and unite against the people who are actually in control, the oligarchs. So let's apply this lesson to the topic of tonight's talk, democracy. The modern definition of democracy, if you were to look at the dictionary, you'll see rule by the people. Is that what democracy is, though? That's the modern popular definition. That's what they would have you believe it is. That's the common understanding. But demos, which is the root word of democracy, didn't mean all the people. A demos of ancient Greece was comprised of a particular town, or one of the divisions of Athens. One. Now, when people settle, think about the way they settled America or any other place. Think about the waves of immigration that came over, right? People tend to settle in patterns. It's not random. People settle together. That might be based on ethnic lines. It might be based on trade. They're all fishermen in a fisherman village, right? It might be based on any number of things, class, family, etc. Therefore, the real meaning of demos and democracy as it relates to ancient Athens, which is where the term came from, is blocks of demos based on things like identity and class uniting together in factions against other demos. Little breakdown showing you just a little video of ancient Athens, what it might have looked like with the different areas, the different classes of people. They didn't live all together. You had one area where there was elites, another area where there was artisans, another area for merchants, the guilds. So it's not democracy in that term, in that sense, never ever meant all of the people, just all the people. So what do we actually have with demos? Demos is far more better represented by the word demographic than the people. Demos has always meant special interests and identity groups. Do these groups rule directly? According to Plato and Aristotle, each of the demos will elevate a champion to represent them and fight for their interests. How do these champions gain power? By making alliances with other demos to form powerful factions. They seize wealth, they deprive the minority of their rights. That's what democracy always has been. How did Aristotle and Plato describe democracy 2,400 years ago? Plato, democracy is born of class conflict, he says. In democracy, the savage is now the ruler. Poor wretches are in a perpetual state of confused language. That sounds familiar? Aristotle, democracy arises out of the notion that those who are equal in any respect are equal in all respects, aka radical equality, aka equity. That in a democracy, the poor have more power than the rich because there are more of them and the will of the majority is supreme. So that's 2,400 years ago. That's how they talked about democracy. That's how they defined democracy. How did the Founding Fathers describe democracy 250 years ago?
Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself.
Hence it is that such democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property.
Democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch.
A democracy is nothing more than mob rule. Ancient democracies never possessed one feature of good government.
The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, is itself a frightful despotism.
But this is a summary of half a dozen of the American founders on democracy and how they thought about it, how they defined it at the time of the founding. Okay. Not a very nice picture. They didn't have good things to say about it. Now, some people will say, oh, they're just talking about direct democracy, that's all. Any one of these people just talking about direct democracy? Doesn't what they're saying here reflect the same thing that Plato and Aristotle were saying 2,000 years ago about democracy and what it really is? Okay.
When you hear democracy in common usage, does it align with an understanding of demos as the people, or with identity politics? Does the manner in which it is asserted make you feel welcomed and included or threatened? Are our democratic leaders advancing a system of equality of opportunity, or are they forcing a sameness and equity unto us at the behest of a vocal and vicious coalition of identities?
Reality check. Does the term democracy comport with the modern usage, the popular rule of the people definition? Or does it better align with the ancient understanding of factional rule by identity politics? Does democracy then represent a good thing worth preserving, or is the terrible, no good, wretched, awful spectacle of mob rule, oligarchs, robbery, tyranny, and oppression?
That's what we're seeing.
Real world usage, just modern times. Some modern time talking about democracy. Here's the German government talking about the need to save their democracy by banning the most popular political party, the AfD.
Yeah.
Going to save democracy by banning the AfD. New Republic, Trump remains a clear and present danger to democracy and seizing control of elections. Yep, okay, Trump, danger to democracy. Canada, the trucker protests in Canada, danger to democracy, right? They had to shut that down. And one of the guys who tried to shoot the current president, democracy is on the ballot. We have to defend democracy. All right. Now, there's some giggling as you read these, but what I'm going to prove to you over the next few minutes is that they're right about the way that they use the word democracy. Okay, proof enough. Did I just prove that democracy continues to and always has conformed to the original definition from the ancients, Plato and Aristotle, through the modern day, to the founders, right up till today? When you hear talk about democracy, protect our democracy, save our democracy, does it align with protecting the rights of people, you, or does it align with elevating certain groups, special interests and identity groups, whatever else, over others? All right. One more word to define real quick is the word fact, because we have a really hard time these days about the idea of opinion, fact, what's what. So they're not, fact and opinion are not different by, they're not quantitatively different, they're qualitatively different, right? The idea behind a fact is it's something for which proofs have been given that connect it to reality such that it obviously represents a high fidelity understanding of a thing. Okay, that's what a fact is. So now, democracy being rule by identity politics, special interests, and factions has been demonstrated to be fact. And please fact check me. Please go back and look at Aristotle, look at Plato, read the founders, read the Federalist Papers. That's what democracy is. What is the legal effect of this? Why am I going on and on about this? Why does it even matter? Well, Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution says the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. It's in the Constitution. Is that the highest law of the land? Guaranteeing to each state a republican form of government? Is a constitutional republic the same thing as a democracy? Well, now some people will say, oh, it's just a type of democracy, right? They'll say a constitutional republic is a type of democracy. Absolutely not. Let's talk about that a little bit. By the way, this is straight from the Constitution. There it is, a Republican form of government is guaranteed. Ancients on constitutional republic. What did they think a constitutional republic was? Aristotle, a constitution determines what is to be the governing body, the mode of its election, and the limits of its authority. Two very important things to pull out of that. Limits to the authority. It's not just do anything. And the mode of its election. That's going to become important in a minute. Second, on constitutional government, it is evident that the form of government is best in which every man, whoever he is, can act best and live happily. Does that remind you of anything from the American founders? Anything about the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Do you think he was reading Aristotle a little bit? Hence, in a constitutional government, the fighting men have the supreme power, and those who possess arms are the citizens. What does that mean? The decentralization of the means of warfare. It's not kept in a specific class of men to lord over the others. Everyone. It's everyone. Something about the Second Amendment? Citizens are all who share in the civic life of ruling and being ruled in turn. What does that sound like? Ruling and being ruled in turn. That sounds like a government of and by and for the people. Okay, that's Aristotle on a constitutional republic. Reality check time. The American Constitution, as written, strictly limits the powers of government to prevent theft and oppression of the minority. It limits the powers of the government. Designed to upset the formation of faction by prohibiting spoils to fight over, and therefore by dividing powers. So if you get rid of the spoils, if you say you can't rob from this person to give to that person, you break down the formation of factions, right? You elevate and you protect the rights of citizens as the foremost reason for the government's existence. You elevate God over government and individual rights as God-given and inalienable by the government. They have no business interfering in individual rights. The whole point of government, according to our Constitution, is to uphold those rights and secure them to us and our posterity. In other words, the exact opposite of democracy that we just learned about. Exact opposite.
The proper term, then, for that which the classical liberals often claim they desire, which is to say a correct amount of freedom tempered by the reality of duties and obligations, is republicanism. In fact, republicanism is what most really think of when they think classical liberalism. For instance, classical liberalism's supposed emphasis on limited government, individual rights under law, and free markets usurped them from the founders' republicanism. Examples abound. Locke's proposed natural rights, life, liberty, property, influenced republican constitutions, not unbridled liberalism or democracy.
All right, voting. What about voting? Voting, that's democracy, right? That's democracy. Is it? It has been a long-running information warfare operation to associate the word democracy with voting, the act of voting. Voting is entirely severable from the form of government known as democracy. Why do we vote? Why do we vote in this country? Because our Constitution says that we're going to vote, because we're a constitutional republic. And voting is common in republics. Always has been. Voting is not even a feature in all democracies. Go read Vladimir Lenin on true democracy. There's no voting in that democracy. We vote because that is the method we outlined in our Constitution, and that has never, ever meant America is, should, ought to be a democracy. Now, which are we? I don't mean which does our Constitution say we are. I mean which, in reality, are we? Over the last decade, do you see government ruling to protect your enumerated rights as you find in the Bill of Rights? Or do they subordinate those rights to various causes, to identity politics, to different groups, to different things? Okay. Do your politicians describe the country as a constitutional republic or as a pluralist democracy? Okay. Does the federal government respect the sovereignty of the states, or does it usurp state powers? Does it seem like the current system will last forever, or does it seem to be degrading into chaos? Well, what did Plato and Aristotle say about democracy being a temporary form of government that always gives way to tyranny? Okay. Final analysis. If I have proven that democracy is awful and the opposite of a constitutional republic, and I have, and if I have proven that the supreme constitutional law demands a republican form of government for each state, and I have Article 4, Section 4, and if we all recognize correctly that we nonetheless live in a democracy at this very moment, and we do, then I hate to break it to you, I have also therefore proven that America underwent a revolution that none of us ever heard of. And that revolution was accomplished and hidden through the manipulation of language, the dialectical control of language, and conquering education and media. Okay, let's say if you're on the same page here. By hands, who thinks it's kind of a big deal? We underwent a revolution against the American founding. Our supreme law, our Constitution, is effectively null and void. Anybody think that's a big deal? Yeah? It's kind of a problem. Okay. Yeah, and doesn't that help explain some of the rulings coming from the Supreme Court? Okay. Let's check this against reality. By hands, how many of you recognize that our present situation in government is stacking up like a Tetris game gone bad with weird shapes about to hit the top? Okay. How important is language? Once more. Without correct definitions, there was no revolution. We're a democracy, and that's just fine. What conclusions, therefore, follow? First, if we actually want a constitutional government, if we want that document to reign supreme as top law in this country, we can't play defense. We don't have a castle to defend anymore. We didn't keep the republic. It's called the counter-revolution. We're mired in a swamp of confused language. Most of our allies can't even comprehend this. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand. How many of the guys you think I sit with there understand the difference between a democracy and a republic and care right now?
I think it's growing.
It's growing. But we're not at critical mass yet. We're working on it. So the first phase of any effective counter-revolution to reinstitute the Constitution as the supreme law of the land starts with aligning our language with the correct, often ancient definitions that have been used forever and understood and reflect reality. Language is our foremost weapon. Be specific, be correct, and align it with reality. Practical considerations. All right, now that you understand a little bit about democracy, what it is, you cannot now use the word democracy to describe the American government in any kind of positive manner. Protect our democracy. You should be maligning it at every opportunity. Tell people what it really is. And get a little angry about it. You don't get up in anybody's face or anything, but get a little angry. Like, what are you talking about? It's not a democracy. It's a horrible thing. Shock them out of their spell. Because that's what it takes to get people to wake up and open a book. Because otherwise, they'll just open the Webster's Dictionary, and what are they going to find? Ruled by the people. What's wrong with that? I don't know. Crack an older book. Over time, we can make the word toxic. Like the founders knew it ought to be, if we do that. You should not tolerate Republicans using the term democracy unless they're criticizing it. Why would they? The use of democracy incorrectly by allies effectively makes them, like agents in the Matrix, in that moment, an enemy that needs to be fought. Refusal by those allies to stop their use of the word democracy in a positive manner ought to mark them out for ruthless criticism and removal. Why? Why do we need to do this? Because we need to turn this into this. Okay? We cannot do that when our leaders reify the democracy spell with their language. Through criticism, we must make the misapplication of the term democracy stigmatized. We must make it taboo. Another reality check. This one's going to be hard. If America has an illegitimate revolutionary government in style of democracy, it does, and if we acknowledge that our counter-revolutionary mission to restore the Republic and the Constitution as supreme law, if we acknowledge that's our mission, do you think they're going to go quietly?
Oh, God.
What has Trump gone up against? Now, he's not even really knowing what he's doing. He just goes up there and throws punches, and he hits some good things on purpose. Sometimes he punches a bad guy, sometimes he punches a baby. But just because he sometimes punches a bad guy, multiple assassination attempts, constant lawfare, and judicial coups. The stacked officer corps led a military coup against him at the end of his first term. Do you remember that when they contacted China and they took away his launch capability authorities? Fraudulent criminal charges and civil charges all across the country. This is what anybody who's going to fight this fight better be ready to take on. They will defend their revolutionary democracy.
That said everything. When he did that, that said everything.
They will defend their revolutionary democracy.